Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zoology lecture series here on the Introductory unit. Today's going to be a quick one. We're going to talk about animal adaptations. So hopefully at this point you have received the link to the Flipgrid challenge about the animal adaptations that I sent out to you, and you've made your responses. And so I have a few responses that I want to show you guys, and we'll talk about how this was kind of an unfair question. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, everybody, today we're going to talk about animal adaptations. And this reminds me of when I used to work at the zoo, and we had two overnight tours that I did with the Nocturnal Adventure Education Program, and one of our programs was called Adaptations, and it was my favorite one to do down at the zoo, and it obviously focused on a lot of animals and their particular adaptations. So what is an adaptation? By definition, an adaptation is an inherited characteristic or trait that helps an organism survive in its environment. Okay, so adaptations. There are millions of adaptations that are out there. So think of, we did our little homework thing where we picked out some of our favorite animals and we found their classification. A lot of animals are classified based on their adaptations. So think about one of your favorite animals and what about it is why it is your favorite. You know, for example, people are impressed with the cheetah because of its amazing speed. You know, out in the open in a straight line, you're looking at a cat that can run over 60 miles an hour. That's pretty impressive. People are impressed with eagles because of their incredible eyesight. Or an owl for its incredible nighttime vision and its ability to see well in the dark. So, speaking of birds, feathers, they're able to fly based on the feathers and the unique ability for the feathers to push air. And the list just goes on and on and on. You know, it can be anything from the way animals vocalize to their camouflage, their leaping ability. Even you have adaptations. You know, your thumb is opposable. You're able to grab things. This allows us to use tools. That's an adaptation. You know, our ability to tan in the sun, that's an adaptation. So we can just go on and on and on and on. All right. So your Flipgrid challenge that I gave you was, what animal has no adaptations? Can you think of one that has none? And most of the time in class, we've done this as a discussion, and I simply said, hey, you know, raise your hand if you can give me an example of an animal that doesn't have an adaptation. And usually someone would suggest an animal, and then I would pick an adaptation that the animal had, and I would explain that that animal does not qualify as being an animal with no adaptation. And the reason I'm able to do that is because it's a trick question. There is no animal that has no adaptations. Every animal out there is adapted very well to survive in its environment, or it's no longer with us. Over 90% of all the living things that have ever existed on this planet are currently extinct. They were here, they did their thing, and now they're gone. Extinction is a natural thing. To quote a line from a movie that you may or may not have seen, dinosaurs had their shot and nature selected them for extinction. And, you know, dinosaurs were on the planet for millions of years. and they had their time, but they couldn't adapt to the changing environment and they went extinct. Our time will come. Everything eventually will be extinct and will be replaced by something else. So that's just the way nature works. But an animal's adaptations allow them to survive in an environment for that particular time. If the environment changes, then they either need to move, adapt, or die. Those are the options. And some animals are very capable of adapting very easily. Sometimes it's a behavior that they're able to adapt to changes by altering their behavior, not necessarily a physical change, but a behavioral change. Again, many times I've probably already said at this point about my affinity for bow hunting whitetails. And whitetails by nature are what is known as crepuscular, which means they are naturally active during the twilight hours of the day, dawn and dusk. And in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, they lay down and rest and nap. That's, we are diurnal. We're active during the day. Active all night is nocturnal, and crepuscular is active in those twilight, dawn, and dusk times. Now, studies have been done on whitetails that are in high pressure hunting areas where people hunt them during the day. They have shifted, especially your mature bucks, have shifted their behavior to go nocturnal. And that is a behavioral adaptation to avoid human predation. They have realized that the only time they really ever see people is right before daylight, during daylight, and then when it gets dark, they leave. And they thought, well, okay, if that's how it's going to be, then I'm not going to come out of my hiding place until it is dark. And that is a behavioral adaptation. So it doesn't have to be physical. It can be something that they do behavior-wise. Coyotes are another one. They have learned how to take advantage of living around people. Raccoons are another one. They're really good at raiding garbage cans and sneaking into your attic, and they're good at what they do. I find an interesting animal is called the barn owl. You guessed it. It's an owl that lives in barns. And the behavioral adaptation is they found out that barns make great nesting places. So where did the barn owl nest before people started building barns is my question. And that definitely is a behavioral adaptation. So the adaptations are what Darwin was commenting on when he talked about survival of the fittest. Now, the term fittest doesn't always mean in shape. When we talk about being fit, we talk about being in shape, exercising, and being cardiovascularly fit. Fit means you are, or an animal's body is well adapted to its environment. Okay. So take an earthworm. An earthworm is not very strong. They're not fast, but for where they live and what they do, they're very well adapted. They burrow in the soil and they eat soil and dead and decaying plant material and convert it into help return those nutrients back to the soil for other plants to use. And they're good at what they do. Now, you take an earthworm and you put him in the water and he quickly becomes fish food. You take an earthworm and you set him on the sidewalk and you turn him into earthworm jerky really quick. So out of their environment, they don't do so well, but in their niche, in their environment, they're very well adapted. So the organism that is best adapted to its environment will survive and pass its genes on to the next generation. That is the essence of survival of the fittest. So If an animal is alive and on this planet, it is well adapted to its environment and therefore must have adaptations. So that's why my question was a trick question. There is no animal that has zero adaptations because they just simply don't exist. If they're not well adapted to their environment, they're gone. They're dead. Their history extinct. So there is no such thing. That is why that is a trick question. So that'll be a good stopping point for us. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up. All right. Kind of went on there for a little bit, but me and animals, I talk a lot about them. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later.